Hi everyone, my name is Jasper Poort, and it's a great pleasure to speak to you about perceptual organization and attention in vision. And you have just seen a very powerful demonstration of a few beautiful visual illusions, and hopefully I can show you some other examples of nice illusions today. So, visual perception is something that seems really easy to us, and it seems to happen without effort and automatically. But in reality, it means that a big part of our brain is continuously working on trying to make sense of what we are seeing and organizing what is coming in. So here's an example of a very simple 2D illustration of a cube. And somehow our brain is capable of reconstructing this and interpreting this as a three-dimensional cube. And also interesting with this stimulus is that you can actually see it in multiple ways. For example, you can see it as a cube that is seen from the top, or alternatively, you can see it as a cube that is seen from the side. And you might notice when you look at the stimulus for a while that your brain is switching between these two possible interpretations. And this shows that perceptual organization is continuously ongoing and refined. So the problem of vision, the big problem is really information overload. There is just too much around, too much to process, and too much to see. So this is an example of when that happens. For example, when you're crossing a busy road, you might be looking around you and see all these nice, beautiful neon colors of the adverts. But at the same time, you also should be aware that there's a lot of cars approaching you rapidly. So at this time, it's much more important to keep in mind that there's these dangers around and focus on these cars instead of these neon adverts. So in other words, not everything can be processed at the same time and not everything is useful. So therefore, visual input needs to be organized and then selected. Here's another example of a visual scene. It's a rather busy background, and in front of it is a table with certain objects. So the first step is really to segment the figure from the background. So the figure is what is important for you, and the background is something that you want to ignore. So in this case, you want to separate the table and the objects on it from the background. And then the next step really is, once you have successfully done this, is to selectively attend those objects that are relevant for you. And this really depends on your behavioral goals and what is important for you at each moment in time. So in this case, if you're, for example, thirsty, you might want to selectively attend the parts of the objects that belong to the beer mug, so you can grab it and drink. Alternatively, if you're not thirsty but you're hungry, you might selectively want to look for the apples and all the parts that are part of it, so you can grab the dish with the apples on it. Another thing that's really important, that this process needs to be fast. For example, if you're a gazelle and you're peacefully enjoying your meal, at the same time you need to be looking around you all the time, because there might be dangers around you, lurking in the grass. And in this case also the dangers might look a lot like grass. So it's really important to have a very sensitive and a very quick detection mechanism. And in this case, if you're lucky, you're able to detect this in time to have enough time to run away from it. So how is this happening? Here's a cartoon of our visual system, and it looks like this, and it consists of visual input coming in through the eye, and from there on, it is passed on to the visual cortex, which is at the back of our brain, and this is where visual information first arrives. And from there on, it's passed on to other visual areas that are doing more complicated functions. And if we want to understand this, we need to draw up like an organization diagram to see how these things are happening. So visual information comes in at the bottom of the hierarchy. First arrives in the primary visual cortex, where very simple features are detected, for example, simple shapes and colors. And from there on, it's passed on to higher level areas. So you could see this as a company, where at the bottom there's the office workers on the floor, and they pass information through to their managers at the upper and middle level. And these managers are going to then work on the information they receive from the lower level, and pass it on to the higher level. And then finally, when a decision is reached, this is converted into movement. So what the task of neuroscientists really is to try to understand what all these elements are doing, what each and every single area is doing, and how they talk to each other in order to understand the whole process. And one way to understand is to see what happens when certain parts of the network get damaged. So one example, if there's a damage at an early stage of the hierarchy, for example in the visual cortex, this means that visual information arrives in the eye without any problem because the eyes are functioning normally, but then it cannot be passed on to higher levels and cannot get through. So this is called cortical blindness, that people are effectively blind even though the eye is completely functional. If the damage happens at a higher level, for example at the parietal cortex, then various differences happen. So instead of having a simple effect that information cannot be passed on, it will be a more complicated effect, because there's a kind of manager function affected. And when this happens, the syndrome that is called visual neglect happens. And this is very common in stroke patients. In about 25% of people with stroke, they have this to some more extent. So one way to reveal how this syndrome looks like is to ask patients with visual neglect to make copies of these simple line drawings. So for example, you present them with a clock, with a house, or with a flower. And then you ask them simply to copy this. And what you then see is the following. You see that these patients have a selective tendency to focus on the one part of space. And this is because when there's damage to the right parietal cortex, they have difficulties attending to the left part of visual space. And also when you ask them to copy something, they will selectively focus on the right part of the objects. So even though these simple line drawings can really be revealing about perceptual organization and attention, real-life stimuli are much more complicated. So I would like to end by presenting you with a challenging picture, and I would like you to try very hard to organize this and attend to the different parts of it. And then I'm going to give you two options to decide. And you can either raise your hand for the first option or for the second option. So let's try it. I'll give you a bit of time to selectively look at this part of the object. And maybe after 5 seconds or so, I'm going to ask you one of two options. So first of all, I would like to ask you to raise your hand if you see a kid in this picture. Did anybody see a kid in this picture at all? Not so many. I think, yeah, at least one person there. Okay, the second option is a face. Does anybody see a face in this picture? Okay, we have a clear winner today. The face is the winner. And actually that single person there was right, because it is actually a kid. So it's a nice family picture where there's a mother and a dad, and the kid is sitting on the lap of the dad. But I agree, this was a bit of a tricky one, because there's a very powerful face present also. So sometimes your brain is making order out of chaos that is actually not there. Just for completion, there was indeed also a face present, although it was not really there. So I would like to end with a summary and say finally that vision is a very complicated problem, even though it seems simple and effortless. And we really have a big part of our brain trying to make sense of what we see. And a lot of areas are working together to organize all this. And sometimes the visual cortex is a bit too good, so it imposes order on something that is not actually there. And that might fool us also at times. So I would like to end by giving you a final example, and I'll just give you the chance to make whatever you like of the last picture. And there might not be anything there, or there might be something there. I'll leave that up for you to decide. And I would also thank the European Union for funding our research projects. Thank you for your attention.